The West Wing continues to put pressure on the Justice Department, with the vice president now standing behind his boss's very public criticism of the Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Vice President Mike Pence says time will tell whether Jeff Sessions has a future in the administration.
I know the Washington way is to talk behind people's backs, but that's not President Donald Trump's approach. One of the great things about this president is you always know where you stand. His expressed disappointment here is very sincere, and he said we'll see what happens in the future, but
right.
at least the American people know, and every member of the cabinet can know that you'll always know where you stand with President Trump.
And Jeff Sessions stands in a very bad place, especially after being so loyal to the president for so long during the campaign. He is now on the outs with the president. The Washington Post reports that President Trump has discussed with confidants and advisors the possibility of firing him and installing a new attorney general through a recess appointment. The White House responded to the report, stating, quote, more fake news from Amazon Washington Post, referring to the newspaper's ownership. Both the Post and the New York Times are reporting that aides have warned him against the political and legal ramifications. Then last night, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee sent the White House a clear message about the prospects for hearings regarding a replacement. Republican Chuck Grassley tweeting, everybody in D.C. should be warned that the agenda for the Judiciary Committee is set for the rest of 2017. Judges first, sub-cabinet second, AG, meaning the Attorney General, no way. Jeff Sessions kept out of the public eye yesterday and was later spotted at the White House, though Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders made clear he was there for other business.
The Attorney General was here for other meetings, not with the president. It was a principals committee meeting, and did not see the president while he was here. I think the president's been very clear about where he is. He's obviously disappointed, but also wants the Attorney General to continue to focus on the things that the Attorney General does. He wants him to lead the Department of Justice. He wants to do that strongly. He wants him to focus on things like immigration, leaks, and a number of other issues, and I think that's what his focus is at this point.
If the Attorney General launches a leak probe, would that help his status with the president?
I don't think that's the nature of the relationship. Again, I think that the president is disappointed. He stated that, and I don't think there's anything more to add beyond that at this point.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders brings up a great point. She talks about what the Attorney General does and the nature of the relationship. Mark Halperin, under normal circumstances, what exactly is the job of the Attorney General of the United States of America?
To represent the United States. It's a complicated thing because he's person's appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate, but that person is the people's lawyer. But there are times when they have to interact with the president, particularly post 9/11. The Justice Department and the FBI director do so much in terms of Homeland Security and national security.
Yeah.
There's an operational team there. When it comes to criminal investigations, antitrust investigations, things like that, it's supposed to be more arm's length, but that is not the kind of hierarchical relationship Donald Trump has ever dealt with.
Oh, so Bob Costa, if you could take this to the next level, Sarah Huckabee Sanders also made a very good point talking about the nature of the relationship. Can you explain the nature of the relationship between Jeff Sessions, very, very supported by the base, by Donald Trump's base, who's very important to him, and the job that he's doing now, and what the president exactly is upset about that Jeff Sessions has done or not done? I just want to make sure that jives with the actual job of the Attorney General of the United States.
This relationship has had two main phases, the campaign and the presidency. When I was in Mobile, Alabama 2 years ago, I saw then Senator Sessions form this bond with candidate Trump, talking through immigration policy, hardline policies that they both shared, and they really were on the fringe of the GOP, and they brought those views to the center. But ever since President Trump took office, and especially since that day in early March when the Attorney General decided to recuse himself, it has been been an unending nightmare for Jeff Sessions. The fury of a president, public grousing, private complaints, they have been unending, and that has remained the problem because the president has felt vulnerable that he doesn't have his kind of ally inside of the Justice Department, and there are questions within the Republican Party about whether that perspective from the president about wanting an ally is appropriate.
Okay. And just to remind everybody, and this does not include what the president said in his interview with the Wall Street Journal or also the news conference with the leader of Lebanon, but he has tweeted this. So these are some of the president's statements about Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Ukrainian efforts to sabotage Trump campaign quietly working to boost Clinton. So where is the investigation attorney general? At Sean Hannity. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has taken a very weak position on Hillary Clinton crimes. Where are emails and DNC servers and intel leakers? That's another tweet. Here's another tweet where the president attacks Jeff Sessions. Why didn't Attorney General Sessions replace acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe, a Comey friend who was in charge of the Clinton investigation, but got big dollars for his wife's political run from Hillary Clinton and her representatives? Drain the swamp. He is definitely not a fan of Jeff Sessions, Nick Confessori. Maybe he should fire him. Maybe that would be better for the president if he'd be more comfortable with his attorney general.
There's the problem. It's not his attorney general, for one thing.
Oh.
Second, if he fires him, he's got to find a new AG, or the deputy AG is the acting AG. The problem with that is Chuck Grassley has just said very clearly there's not going to be room for a nomination. And the final thing would be a recess appointment, which the president could try. And it's possible the Senate could block that by keeping the Senate in a pro forma session. I think the bigger problem here, though, honestly, I think often the president is all tactics and no strategy. He lives in the right now. He lives in the day.
Right.
He does the thing that makes sense for him politically right now in the day. He does not always think about 3 or 4 or 5 steps down the road and what's the end game for the course of action he has charted. I think we're seeing that now with Sessions.
The press and a lot of Democrats have looked at the tolerance of Republicans on Capitol Hill for some of the things the president has done up until now and said, how can they do this? How can they be going along with the president, compartmentalizing this way? I believe the most significant aspect of this, in many ways, is that Republicans in Congress will not put up with this. They're already at their wits' end about what the president's done regarding this investigation. Now what he's done in terms of Sessions, they're running the risk of alienating Republicans and affecting any commerce they have with
They're being very embarrassed on many levels. Costa?
Just to add to Mark's point, it's not only Republicans on Capitol Hill who he risks infuriating if he goes after the Attorney General. It's the conservative base, even the populist base.
Wait, what do you mean if?
Party.
He has gone after him. He has eviscerated him over the past few days. Publicly, humiliated him, shamed him.
Couldn't agree more. I think if he moves forward with an actual firing, you could see some revolt on the right. In the Breitbart wing of the Republican Party, Sessions is for nearly a decade the hero. And if you take out the hero from the cabinet, you're going to have perhaps a political cost.
It's fascinating. The Wall Street Journal's editorial board writes about Trump's Sessions abuse. Quote, Mr. Trump's suggestion that his attorney general prosecute his defeated opponent is the kind of crude political retribution one expects in Erdogan's Turkey or Duterte's Philippines. Mr. Sessions had no way of knowing when he accepted the AG job that the Russia probe would become the firestorm it has, or that his belated memory of brief public meetings with the Russian ambassador in 2016 would require his recusal from supervising the probe. He was right to step back once facts were out, not the least to shelter the Trump administration from any suspicion of a politicized investigation. If Mr. Trump wants someone to blame for the existence of special counsel Robert Mueller, he can pick up a mirror. Mr. Trump prides himself as a man above political convention, but there are some conventions he can't ignore without destroying his presidency. And Casey, Republicans on Capitol Hill are, I would contend they might be at a risk at this point if they don't take a look at what's happening here and decide whether or not they want to go their own way.
I think we may be at that point, Mika. I mean, look, how often the Washington Post wrote an editorial that sounded a lot like what you just read from the Wall Street Journal. When those two editorial pages are on the actual same page, that's pretty surprising. And look, I think I have been surprised by the just complete directness with which Republicans have been going at this issue privately, publicly. This doesn't compare to any of these other situations where, you get people walking onto the subway train in the Capitol saying, I don't comment on the president's tweets. Yeah. They are commenting on this. And look, it's going to put the Republican agenda is already mostly stalled. If the president goes through with, as Bob was saying, an actual firing of the attorney general, I think you could actually see open warfare between the president and his party on the Hill. We have seen them kind of apologize for him, be concerned or afraid of the forces that put him in office and unclear on what that means for their own political futures. I think they are very clear about how they feel about Jeff Sessions in this situation.
Sam Stein?
I mean, I suppose I agree, but I want to see what happens with the vote on health care today. Mm-hmm. I mean, there is an underlying thread through all of this, which is that Trump, as Richard alluded to in the last block, feels like he always should get his way. And when it comes to Jeff Sessions, that means, having Jeff Sessions unrecuse himself from this probe or badgering him publicly for that recusal. When it comes to the transgender ban that was announced hastily, which is a charitable word for how it was announced yesterday, it's just making military policy without consulting the Department of Defense. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to health care, there's a story today that the Interior Department was threatening the Alaska senators for Lisa Murkowski's vote against health care reform. Right. The pattern here is always the same, which is that Trump, and by extension his cabinet, feel like they can always and should always get their way, and they're willing to badger people until they do. So I'm a little hesitant to say that it's going to create open warfare. It should have created more pushback to this point. I want to see what happens today for health care.
Bob Costa?
And when you look at the case that's being made to the president inside of the White House, his top advisors are telling him, based on my reporting, don't just refuse to fire him because we don't want to have this public spectacle of the president firing another top law enforcement officer. Also resist doing it, they're telling him, because he really is the most reliable cabinet official in terms of enforcing the president's immigration policies, law enforcement policies. He actually believes in Trumpism, or this kind of nationalism, hardline conservatism, and he's following through on it on many fronts. And if he goes, they say, don't think that your views are just suddenly going to always be pushed throughout the government.
Goodness, Richard, it seems so self-destructive.
Well, it's interesting you say that. The Wall Street Journal, the same editorial you read from, let me just quote 3 other sentences. A sitting president is not a one-man show. He needs allies in politics and allies to govern. Mr. Trump's treatment of Jeff Sessions makes clear that he'll desert both at peril to his presidency.
Yeah.
So I actually think, again, what this highlights is the difference between governing and everything he has done in his previous life, and what worked for him before will be definitely and positively counterproductive now.
There's nothing Jeff Sessions could do on the Russia investigation now because he's recused.
Right.
And if he quit, it would be horrible for the president.
I know, and you can't untweet things. I think Anthony Scaramucci disagrees with that. He thinks if you delete your tweets, it doesn't mean you said it. You actually still said it, and now you're hiding it. So that's not really transparent. And now the president, can he unsay everything he has said on camera and in his Twitter accounts about Jeff Sessions? He has humiliated the man. He's totally, completely undermined his attorney general. It's just flabbergasting.
It's actually strengthened him, though.
Jeff Sessions? Well, that's the thing, is that Jeff Sessions doesn't need Donald Trump.
This is as popular in Washington as he has been in a very long time.
Yes.
He's always had his supporters in the Senate where he served. You have Democrats supporting him now who voted against him for Attorney General. This is a good, in a certain sense, this is as good as it gets for him.
It's made him bigger and stronger and more supported on both sides of the aisle.
And it's
so I guess he can thank the president.
Well, it showed weaknesses in the president.
And weaknesses in Trump, some might argue.
If you go after the king, you've got to get the king. He didn't kill the king here.
Goodness, I just don't understand. Through a recess appointment, The White House responded to the report stating, quote, more fake news from Amazon Washington Post, referring to the newspaper's ownership. Both the Post and the New York Times are reporting that aides have warned him against the political and legal ramifications. Then last night, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee sent the White House a clear message about the prospects for hearings regarding a replacement. Republican Chuck Grassley tweeting, everybody in D.C. should be warned that the agenda for the
very sincere, and he said we'll see what happens in the future, but
right.
at least the American people know, and every member of the cabinet can know that you'll always know where you stand with President Trump.
And Jeff Sessions stands in a very bad place, especially after being so loyal to the president for so long during the campaign. He is now on the outs with the president. The Washington Post reports that President Trump has discussed with confidants and advisors the possibility of firing him and installing a new attorney general.
Was here. I think the president's been very clear about where he is. He's obviously disappointed, but also wants the attorney general to continue to focus on the things that the attorney general does. He wants him to lead the Department of Justice. He wants to do that strongly. He wants him to focus on things like immigration, leaks, and a number of other issues, and I think that's what his focus is at this point.
If the Attorney General launches a leak probe, would that help his status with the president?
The West Wing continues to put pressure on the Justice Department, with the vice president now standing behind his boss's very public criticism of the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. Vice President Mike Pence says time will tell whether Jeff Sessions has a future in the administration.
I know the Washington way is to talk behind people's backs, but that's not President Donald Trump's approach. One of the great things about this president is you always know where you stand. His expressed disappointment here is...
The Judiciary Committee is set for the rest of 2017. Judges first, subcabinet second, AG, meaning the Attorney General, no way. Jeff Sessions kept out of the public eye yesterday and was later spotted at the White House, though Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders made clear he was there for other business.
The Attorney General was here for other meetings, not with the president. It was a principals committee meeting, and did not see the president while he